now we're going to have a very important special guest speaker. I think we've made mention of Amazon Web Services a couple times now, and it's no secret to anyone in this room that they've really transformed the landscape of computing and technology and application architectures and everything in between. So we've had a great relationship with Amazon for many years, and in particular, we've had a particularly strong relationship with David McCann. David is a remarkable leader. He has responsibility for many of the most strategic capabilities at Amazon, including migration services, getting all your workloads to the cloud, marketplace, making it easy to procure whatever technology you want through Amazon. And we're a proud partner in that program, and control services as well. So perfect alignment with his vision and ours. And so, David, we're delighted to have you here to speak about your vision on observability and what Amazon is doing as we go forward. So thank you, Dave.
Good morning. And it's a privilege, Lou, to be here, and thank you for the courtesy of your time, and frankly, for the opportunity to speak to this room. I think you've had an American accent, a South African accent, and now you have a Scottish accent. So when I was sitting there hearing about taxonomy and languages, there's a lot of translation going on. It's a play on words. So it's a real privilege to be here. You know, I was doing some math before I started the meeting. You know, maybe 300 companies or 400 companies here, and I'm going to talk about a mental model. Amazon talks about mental models, how we think the world behaves. But if we assume that every company has 1,000 applications in this room, 300 companies, there's 300,000 applications or more. And if we think that an application runs our 8 or 10 instances, there may be 3 million instances that you're managing and administering, and there are things happening every day in a continuous world. So there's a lot of change happening in the next 30 minutes while I talk. So what I want to do is kind of relate some of the things that we're doing in AWS, and I can't fully represent everything because I run a piece of it. I run about 8 of our services, and I've been at AWS for about 5 years. And for those of you who care that I'm not too biased, I did spend a stint at Microsoft and a stint at IBM, so I have lived in other ecosystems. Let's kind of talk about what we're doing and why New Relic is a very important partner. And we're really both engineering in parallel, we're innovating in parallel, and as we innovate in parallel, you're a customer very often both of New Relic and of AWS. If you're not a customer of AWS, we'd like you to be, but we have to earn your trust. AWS's message to our customers is we really want to take some of the, what we call the undifferentiated heavy lifting of running infrastructure. We want to automate that for you and allow you as a company to focus on doing the things that you're best, such as Chris discussed at Cox Automotive. And we've been doing that since 2006, when we started with our first service, which was S3, Simple Storage Service, which then got to Elastic Compute, and I'll show you where we've gone. We want companies to be able to innovate like a startup. I spent 6 years in Silicon Valley. You started as a startup. And, you know, agile development, you know, Jim Highsmith started writing the agile framework around about 1999. There were 6 different approaches. And here we are 19 years later talking about SAFe. So we've really been in the agile era for about 20 years, but we're not done. Everybody wants to behave like a startup. And then we're changing the economics of compute. And in changing the economics of compute, network, and storage, people are migrating to the cloud and they're closing data centers. You're part of that transition. And at the same time, job one is security and risk, and everything has to be secure. And we're changing the economics of this as we build a global capability of what we call regions. And for those of you, hands up if you are actually a company that uses anything on AWS, just so I can get a sense of the room, maybe half. Got a lot of work to do on the other half. The reality is that, you know, there are many data centers around the world. We're building out what we call these very large regions. This year, we just stood up new regions in Bahrain, in Stockholm, and in Hong Kong. And a region has multiple availability zones. They're in separate buildings, X miles apart, and allows you to now deploy and provision applications closest to where your users are. And we have that region deployment mode where you can take code and just provision to wherever you want to go, point-click provision. And, you know, I'm working with a British company right now, but a major application is going to be provisioned first in Sydney. Then they're going to roll it out to other regions. And so you roll your applications out to wherever you want to be in the world. And we've got additional regions coming all around the world. So as we do this, we're laying on top of that a set of services. And in the agile model that we all run, when I joined AWS in November of 2014, we had 35 services. And today we say we have 165. So if you run the math, it's about 2 new services a month. So that's a new set of services, it's a new set of APIs, it's a new set of capabilities that your developers can invoke, which means they have to be monitored, tracked, attached to application code, and we're standing up these services, and all of our customers start to use more and more services. And there's a couple of companies in the room here that I know very well, including Cox Automotive, and a typical customer could be using between 40 and 120 of our services. Really depends on what their application stack is and where they're headed. And we started in the bottom left-hand corner there with compute, storage, and network, and we've moved into migration tools, which I'll talk about, security, compliance, app services, DevOps. And up on the top there, the blue row is something called Marketplace, where we also have to provision all the third-party software you use. And so as you move your workloads to the cloud, and we work with New Relic wants to have observability, and we're constantly innovating at fast speed. And you know, when I joined computing in 1982, there were about 1 million developers on the planet. And now I think the statistic is there are 20 million developers on the planet. This is actually the year where America is now outnumbered by developers in India. It's the first year where America has slid to number 2. And there's 20 million developers, and we're all creative, and we're all coding, and we're increasingly coding on APIs. So the velocity of innovation is exponential. And there are more ideas in this room than we have time to code. And what's happening at the enterprise level, a mental model that we've landed, is that a large enterprise, a big organization, has got at least 1,000 apps. And there's a couple of companies in this room that I know who might say that we have 9,000 apps. The biggest one I've come across right now in the world is 11,000. But you've got some number of apps, and those apps have been built over 30 years. In some cases, you have an app written by somebody who's retired, and you may not even have the code, but it still runs. And you're really changing your application models, and you're modernizing. You're also throwing away old apps. You're moving to new apps. And on the right-hand side is the future. The past is 1,000 monolithic apps running on Windows and Unix or on some kind of VMware virtualized on-prem facility, and you're moving apps to the cloud. And as you move apps to the cloud, you have a lot of choices. Is it software as a service? Let somebody else manage it. Is it serverless? Do I go to Lambda? Do I go to containers, and am I a Docker fan or a Kubernetes fan, and which way do I want to go? Is it still a machine image, and it's an AWS machine image, or do I still have it on VMware, and it's an OVM, VD, kind of model? You've got to decide what your modernization strategy is for your portfolio, and depending on your industry, in banking, you may be 70% in-house developed, and in retail, you're 90% off the shelf. So depending on your industry, your ratio of how much you build and how much you buy is very different. All of it has to be monitored, measured, and managed. And what we're learning as you move to the cloud, there's cost rationalization, there's cost change, and there's a lot of change. And so really, we're in an amazing age of transformation. I mean, this is really, and I've been in software for 38 years. It's a pretty fun time, but it's also transformational. The velocity pace is massive. And we estimate that just in the largest 10,000 customers in the world, there'll be somewhere between 5 and 6 million applications moving to the cloud. So you've all got apps, you're going to move some of them to the cloud, the economics are there, data centers are closing, Cox is not unusual, and that takes a lot of data to be observed and managed. And that's where our partnership with New Relic is really good, but it starts in actual fact, in our view, at the migration journey. So I have a mental assumption that most of you in this room, in 3 years' time, and our advisory board says, today, Dave, we're 15% in the cloud, we think we'll be 75% in the cloud in 3 years' time. So most of you are going to move a whole bunch of apps. So migration right now is a huge thing, and we're working with New Relic on migration. And we talk about a cloud adoption journey. You can start with a project, you can start with a website, you can start laying in a foundational architecture on which you move your apps. We have something called a landing zone. We set up separation of responsibilities, security models. You begin to bring over a set of apps. Then you start doing cloud native development. You start to retire older apps. And now you've transformed a lot of your model, and you're very agile. And through all of that, New Relic would say that some number of what they see measured is running on AWS, and I think, Lou, the number's 40% of your agents are monitoring things running on AWS. And then we go through what Chris talked, which is what's a well-architected framework for how to design apps in the cloud, elasticity, capability, security. And as you do that, New Relic kind of becomes very valuable as a visibility tool, as a monitoring tool, as a judgment tool on how you're actually going to migrate. So they're a great migration partner. And we have a whole methodology. We're doing migrations with thousands of companies around the world. We track it. I run migration services. I actually have 4 engineering teams just working on migration tools. We have a professional services practice. And we've actually certified about 90 partners around the world, from an Accenture and a Deloitte to boutique outfits like CloudReach and Second Watch, who specialize in migration. And as you migrate, we come in with a methodology which involves, on the left-hand side, discovery and planning. And discovery and planning needs visibility to apps, instrumentation, and what you're going to move. And then you have a set of decisions, and eventually, on the right-hand side, we have to get a new operating model, a cloud operating model. And as you move to the cloud, it's going to be very different than your on-prem model, because you're not managing in data center physics. It's all just virtual and API. It's a very different model. So there's a lot of redesign, and in that transformation of your business, your applications, and your development methodologies, observability is a common topic we agree with New Relic. Everything needs to be measured and monitored. I have developers in 7 locations. I'm doing releases every week. All my teams are agile, so I'm living that every day. We have to publish and put data everywhere on the planet and monitor it by the second. And as you do that, you're going to be making a bunch of decisions on application complexity. Should I move the app? Should I kill the app? Should I retire the app? Do I not care? Do I modernize? There's a lot of decisions going on every day, and our solution architects can help you on that. But visibility becomes part of the decisioning. So migration actually says, hey, I have to have a business case. Why would I move this to the cloud? Do I leave it on-prem? What's good for the business? Is it faster? Is it more reliable? Is it more scalable? Is it elastic? And if so, how do we make those decisions? And New Relic fits into a couple of tools that we just bought. So we just acquired a company in Canada called TSO Logic, who business cases very well Windows Server workloads. What do they look like on-prem? And what would they look like running on AWS? But we need the data to inform TSO Logic in order to run the model for you. And then we acquired a company in Israel to accelerate the migration of that app. And so what we're actually doing is we've already worked with TSO Logic and with New Relic. Our teams are co-engineering together. Thank you for the partnership. And so the data from New Relic informs the TSO Logic model. And all AWS solution architects are getting the TSO Logic model into which the New Relic data can be pumped, and it gives the customer better advice on what would that look like to be expressed on an AWS platform. It's not a server-for-server equivalent. We have an architecture called Nitro. We distribute the I/O and the network patterns very different on a virtual machine on AWS than you do on a physical Dell or HP. So the workload pattern of I/O and network is not the same, so it's not a one-to-one move. But the instrumentation from New Relic informs the model. You phase your migration. Then we actually move the applications at speed. We acquired Cloud Endure. They do a perfect block replica of the app, move the entire stack. We need to know application dependencies. New Relic tells you about the application dependencies. And now New Relic becomes important for the operations of what we just moved. And with a company last month, we used Cloud Endure to move 1,000 applications in 30 days. So we're moving apps at a very fast pace. And literally, we have customers who are saying, in Northern California, I'm closing that data center, I have 300 apps, and I need to have the data on all the apps to know what I can move. You know, Condé Nast put a sign on the data center and said, thank you, we sold the data center, $20 million. Now it's running in AWS. So that's what's happening. And we have a tool called Migration Hub, and so the data from New Relic flows into Migration Hub. We give this to the consulting firms, to the partners, and so New Relic's populating the Migration Hub insight. After you've migrated, you're moving to CI/CD pipelines. There's a lot of tools in the world. You're going to pick your own tools. We have tools. Other great software companies have tools. We have a whole set of capabilities around AWS Code Pipeline. New Relic, again, does a lot of integration with our tool chains, and so visibility matters to your whole CI/CD pipeline if you're using our tools or all the third-party tools you're bringing. Now, that gets me to third-party. And we've been working with New Relic for 2 years on Marketplace because you are not just moving a current app. I'd have you think, and I have data on this, you're going to throw away 20% of your vendors. So I have a set of vendors in my data centers, and we've done studies. In fact, one of the companies in this room helped me create this model. I won't name them, but I chatted to them this morning, and I sat down with the CIO and I said, as you move to the cloud, what's your challenge? And he said, we have 2,200 applications, and we have about 900 vendors. And when we go to the cloud, we've got a set of architects. And as we journey over, we're going to keep some of our really big vendors, obviously Microsoft and maybe Oracle for a while, SAP and VMware are there. And there's a bank in London said, we have 500 cats and dogs. We're not really sure what we have. We'd like visibility to it, and we don't think it's coming. And in the middle, there are 50 architecturally important vendors for cloud journey. So most customers are on you spend a lot on the big ones, you've got cats and dogs on the bottom, and when you move to the cloud, you've got to bring the vendor with you. And so part of what we do is we also make it easy to bring your vendor with you. And right now, we've instrumented 1,400 software companies into Marketplace. We've embedded them into the EC2 console, the ECS console, the EKS console. We just put it into the SageMaker machine learning console, and it's point-click bring, point-click subscribe. And we did some of that work with New Relic, so that New Relic's in Marketplace. And here are the popular vendors that people bring. So we've done a study. It's at a data warehouse. I see it every day. And while we've got 1,400 vendors, everybody starts with security. And I would posit to you that you're really heading to a world of DevSecOps and not DevOps, because security is everybody's job. And what everybody wants to do is to just weave security into your deployment framework. And so security gets deployed into your model, storage gets deployed into your model, database, monitoring, DevOps, BI, it's all just APIs, it's all provisioned, and you have to monitor it all, and this is where New Relic's visibility comes in. Now, you're really in a team sport, and you guys are the Go Fast team. We have this joke that we talk about the Ducati crowd and the Volvo crowd. The Ducati crowd are running down the freeway at 100 miles an hour on a motorbike with no helmets. And that's development and DevOps, and you guys are the Ducatis. You're really quick and you're high risk. The governance and procurement teams are on the Volvo with the kid in the back seat, seat belts and 30 miles an hour. And they're kind of feeling that you guys are way ahead, and when I say guys, including ladies. And so there's this tension between governance and innovation. And as you instrument visibility, you also have to conform with governance, Sarbanes-Oxley controls, risk management. So there's a team sport here where IT and cloud ops is in love with agile and DevOps, but the rest of the company doesn't know what it is. And you're the change agent. You're the student. You're the learner. We're in a learning meeting this morning. Lou's telling you to go faster. And the rest of the company is going, that's painful. So we have to bring along the rest of your company on transformation. You're going to be bringing in new vendors. You're going to be buying new vendors. You're going to work with your suppliers. And it all has to be monitored. And all of that is not automated. And New Relic's a great partner for us there in automating this visibility. So, we actually talked about Cox, and I chatted to Chris, and we actually built a workflow for vendors to quote right into your AWS master payer account. So if you're using AWS, you end up with a master payer account, an organization, a set of child accounts. You give your development teams a test account, a dev account, and a prod account. And a large customer, if you've got 300 teams, you could end up with 900 accounts, and you want to entitle the software into the right account. And all that quotation process we've actually built with New Relic. And they've been a partner with us into our APIs. We've actually built some APIs to instrument for them and meter, and we worked with Chris at Cox. And so Cox contracting and provisioning of New Relic was actually done on a new Marketplace API. So we're co-engineering with them on migration, we're co-engineering with them on provisioning, and we're kind of doing this in a service management framework where you use a lot of vendors, and AWS is one of your vendors, but we're not the only game in town. So you've got a lot of workflows in ServiceNow on the top right-hand side. You've got a lot of governance controls on Coupa and Ariba on the left-hand side. And the Go Fast Ducati crowd come along with everything brand new DevOps. And you have to slide it into a governance framework. And on the bottom, AWS is standing up IAM, organizations, control tower, management tools, license management. So New Relic's in the Go Faster crowd, and we have to bring along the governance crowd, and you have to have a good balance between innovation and governance. And we're working on that, and we're working with New Relic on it. So we've kind of gone from we want you to innovate, be like a startup. We want you to migrate really quickly. We also have to reduce risk with a really good operating model. So on the operations side, our professional services teams have got a cloud operating model that we recommend. You're going to design what your operating model is. You heard Chris at Cox talk about how he's doing it, and he's got over 90 architects. He's got people working on release trains, and how do you apply good governance over what your teams are doing. So AWS is building out a set of capabilities, and New Relic's working on integrating with those capabilities. I own some of these services, but not all of them. And we have a set of team. In fact, if you looked at the AWS console, in November of last year, we changed the console title to Management and Governance. Because you have to go fast, and you have to have DevOps, but you also have to have compliance. And you can't have one without the other. And so there's a set of tools up there on who has access. Control Tower is a new one, organizations and budgets. And as Lou talked about spend management visibility, there's opportunity for us to work with them there. In the middle, we have a whole set of provisioning tools around CloudFormation, which is a JSON tool, Service Catalog, which is a templating tool, and there's opportunity for us to do even more work over there with New Relic. And then on the management side, they're already well integrated and have done a super job of pulling data out of CloudWatch and our other tools. So New Relic is making your job easy by working with us on a regular basis, because we share this belief that monitoring at scale has to happen. So a common mental model between New Relic and AWS is monitoring at scale and high velocity is how you get a high quality outcome. And we measure everything at Amazon. We have canaries on everything, and we monitor everything all the time. And so CloudWatch is one of our primary mechanisms for that, and the New Relic team does a really good job of integrating with a lot of our management and governance tools. Lots of visits to Seattle, co-engineering dialogues, API clarifications. There's knowledge transfer going on between our two companies so that you have a world-class experience. And another one that I had, literally, I looked at some of the new code that Lou's released today, and I had a meeting last week with one of my engineering managers. We run something called Service Catalog. It's a JSON template library. We've written a full integration into ServiceNow. Last week, I just put tags on it, so you can put a tag on a portfolio. And in Service Catalog, we have the concept of a product, and a portfolio, and a team, and a cost center, and a budget. And we integrated it into ServiceNow, and we integrated it into BMC. And now I want New Relic to either write the cost center and tag in, or read the cost center and the tag out. And we put alerting on a template that you're launched in Sydney, and maybe you shouldn't have launched in Sydney. And if you did launch in Sydney, are you over budget? And so how do we bring that cleverness of New Relic into this kind of service catalog framework? And there's more work there, so start coding. And that's the kind of thing that we want to do together. The shared experience we want to give Chris at Cox or anybody else is that we want you to have a phenomenal, agile, secure, compliant, scalable, cost-efficient, elastic environment on which you can innovate really quick. And we can't do it without great partners. And right now in Marketplace, I'm partnering with 1,400 vendors, and we're all learning together, and none of us know everything. Right? One of the things we say at Amazon when we write a plan is unless you know better, which basically says we have a really good idea, but if you know better, we should change that. And so New Relic is a very clever, innovative company. We think we're reasonably innovative and clever, but nobody has a monopoly on good ideas. And everybody in this room has good ideas. How do we invoke those ideas together so that you can actually run your business better, drive your costs down, be highly compliant, innovate really quick? And I think the two of us together are doing a modestly good job of giving you a good experience. I think there's a lot more we can do. And while I'm here today, I'm all ears for ideas on how we can do it better together. And thank you very much for your time.